My mom was the kindest person I knew until I opened that box. I never thought packing up my mother's house would break me more than her death. But grief isn't loud. It's not the funeral. It's in the silence. When you find her old sweater still folded in the laundry basket. When you hear her voicemail one last time before you delete it. When you open a drawer and suddenly a whole decade breathes out at you. It took me 3 days to make it to her bedroom. I'd been avoiding it like it was sacred or cursed. The room was exactly as she left it. Her rose-colored blanket still creased at the foot of the bed, a glass of water half full on the nightstand, and the smell, lavender, with a faint trace of Vicks and vanilla lotion. I sat on the floor and just stared for a while. Then something caught my eye. Near the base of her old vanity, a wooden floorboard looked uneven, slightly raised at one edge. It was strange because I remembered she used to scold me whenever I played near that corner. Even as a child, she would say, "Not there, Emma. That part of the floor is off limits." I'd never questioned it. She was my mother. She was kind, careful, thoughtful. If she said no, it meant no. But now she was gone, and all the rules went with her. I wedged my fingers under the plank. It creaked, resisted, then gave way with a dry snap. Beneath it was a hollow, just large enough for a box. It was old, maybe older than me. Worn oak, heavy, locked with a small brass latch. There was something almost theatrical about it, as if it had been waiting for me all these years. I looked around the room, almost expecting her to walk in and stop me. But the house was empty. I turned the box in my hands. On the lid, written in faded black ink, were 3 words: "Do not open." My stomach tightened. I could have stopped. I could have left it there and walked away. But curiosity, like grief, doesn't ask for permission. It just moves in. I searched her closet. Inside the pocket of her winter coat, the one she hadn't worn in years, I found a tiny brass key. I hesitated only for a moment, then turned the lock. It clicked. The lid creaked open. And I swear, the room got colder. Inside was a small bundle wrapped in yellowing linen. I unwrapped it, layer by layer, like peeling back history. The first thing I saw, a black and white photograph. My mother, but much younger, maybe in her 20s, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. He had strong features, dark eyes, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. They were holding hands, but her face wasn't smiling. I stared at the photo, confused. Who was he? Beneath it was a piece of cloth, torn and stained with what looked like blood, and then a notebook. Not a full journal, just a slim one. Pages loose, scribbled, uneven. The handwriting was hers, but not the version of her I knew. The first line read, "I thought I buried this memory, but some things never stay buried." My hands were shaking. At the bottom of the box lay one final item, a tarnished silver necklace. Simple, oval pendant, etched with the initials. HDI froze. I had seen this necklace before, not in real life, but in an old article about an unsolved missing person case. A man named Henry Dawson, last seen in 1996, disappeared without a trace. The only thing found was the picture of him wearing this very necklace, and now it was in my mother's box. I placed the necklace back in the box, my hand still trembling, not because it was evidence from an unsolved case, but because I was starting to fear the woman I had once believed to be flawless. The name Henry Dawson kept echoing in my mind like a distant, hollow sound. Was it just a coincidence? a mistake? Or was my mother truly involved in his mysterious disappearance? I carried the box downstairs and opened my laptop. My fingers shook as I typed, Henry Dawson, 1996, missing. The results popped up instantly. Henry Dawson, male, 28 years old, missing from Ridgefield, September 1996. No trace found. Case remains unsolved. His portrait filled the screen, and I froze. That face. It was the same man in the black and white photo with my mother. The same eyes, the same jawline. But what chilled me more than recognition was the strange sense deep in my chest. Not just that I had seen him before, but that I saw something of myself in his eyes. I kept scrolling. There was a short paragraph that made me shiver. According to an anonymous witness, Henry was dating a woman known only as R. Estimated age between 25 and 30, brown hair, slim build. The woman reportedly left town just days after the disappearance. I looked again at the photo of my mother in her 20s. R. Rose. My mother's name was Rose, and she had moved away from Ridgefield in 1996. I swallowed hard. Pieces were starting to fall into place. But I still didn't understand everything. I didn't dare think the worst. Yet. I looked down at the notebook my mother had kept inside the box. I almost opened it, then stopped myself. I couldn't read it. Not yet. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because my heart wasn't ready to see my mother, the woman who had taught me to be kind, through a different lens. I decided to investigate from another angle. I called Mrs. Baker, my mother's closest friend from years ago, someone who still lived nearby. I'm sorting through Mom's things, I began. Do you remember where she lived before she moved here? There was a pause on the other end. Back then, I think it was a little town called Ridgefield. But she never talked about it much. Why do you ask, Emmy? I forced a smile. Oh, no reason. Just trying to learn more about her younger years. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The box rested beside me, quiet but heavy, like it was whispering things I couldn't hear yet. I held the necklace once more. My fingers gripped it gently. I didn't know what my mother had gone through. I didn't know who Henry was to her, but I knew if I wanted to truly understand the woman who gave me life, I had to be willing to walk into the darkness she left behind. And there seemed to be only one person still alive who could tell me the truth. Her name was Carla. I found her after 3 days of searching. Her name was Carla Emerson, listed in a public record from 15 years ago, with an address in the northern outskirts. She lived alone in a small wooden house, nearly isolated from the rest of town. I stood at the gate, palms damp with sweat. I had imagined this moment many times. What I would say, how she would react. But when the door opened, I just stood there, speechless. She was around 60, a thin face, eyes that seemed to already know I had come to dig up something she had spent a lifetime burying. She wasn't surprised when I said my name. She just looked at me for a long time and quietly said, "Come in, dear. It's cold out here." Her house wasn't messy, but it wasn't neat either. Everything had a feeling of neglect, not poverty, just a kind of letting go. I sat on a worn-out fabric chair. Carla poured me a cup of ginger tea. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. Eventually, I started. "I'm Rose's daughter. My mom just passed, and I found some things she left behind." Carla didn't respond. She just stared down at her hands. hands freckled with age spots, but still strong and steady. I took the wooden box from my backpack, opened it, placed the black and white photo on the table, set the necklace beside it. Carla glanced at them quickly, then turned her face away. "I know him," she said. "Yes," I whispered. "Henry Dawson." A faint sound, just like a small gasp, escaped from her throat, like an old clock that jolts to life after stopping. She leaned back in her chair. Her gaze drifted. "Did your mother ever tell you about any of this?" I shook my head. She never talked about her past. Carla gave a dry, bitter smile. Rose was better at hiding things than anyone I've ever known. I hesitated, then asked, "Who was Henry? Did my mom have anything to do with his disappearance?" Carla didn't answer right away. She got up, walked slowly to the window, where the last light of the afternoon spilled across the wooden floor. That question I don't have the right to answer. But if you've come this far, then you need to be ready to accept that. The person you love the most might once have been someone you can't even imagine. My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Carla turned to me. Her eyes now met mine, not cold, but tired. Deeply, deeply tired. Some people only become kind because they've done something they can't undo, and they choose to live the rest of their lives quietly, paying for it. I didn't know what to say. There was no answer, no conclusion, just a rising feeling, like I had taken one more step down a dark basement without knowing how many steps were left before I hit the bottom. Carla said nothing more that day. Before I left, she only told me, "If you truly want the truth, come back. But next time, don't bring the box, bring your courage." That night, I opened the notebook my mother left behind. The first page read, "Carla told me I should stay silent. But I know, someday Emma will find out." I didn't continue reading my mother's notebook. I closed it, tucked it into a drawer, as if part of me still refused to believe that what I had seen was real. Instead, I began doing something I never imagined I'd have to do in 29 years. I started investigating my own mother's past. I started with Ridgefield, the town Mrs. Baker once mentioned my mother had lived in. On an old newspaper archive site, I found a series of brief articles about the 1996 disappearance. A man named Henry Dawson, age 28, vanished mysteriously after an argument with his girlfriend. No body was found, no signs of forced entry, no witnesses saw him leave the house. The only known companion was a woman named Rose who left town shortly after the incident. I clicked on the attached photo. There was no mistaking it. It was my mother, younger, thinner, but the eyes, those eyes, I could never forget. I kept searching. Another article, written years later, mentioned the retired detective who once led the investigation. Detective Maynard, now living in a nearby town. I arranged to meet him at a quiet coffee shop near the forest edge. Maynard, in his 70s, was still sharp. When I introduced myself as Rose's daughter, he flinched slightly, then sighed. "I always wondered for years if you really existed." I showed him the photo and the necklace. He stared at them for a long time, then said, "Henry wasn't an easy man, I'll be honest. Charismatic, magnetic, but short-tempered, secretive. We suspected Rose had something to do with his disappearance, but there was no body. No witness, nothing strong enough to press charges. Some thought she was just a victim of a bad relationship, but me? I was never sure." I asked, Did my mother have any other family back then? Someone named Carla? Maynard nodded slowly. Older sister, but she vanished around the same time. I tried to track her down, but no one really knew where they went. I left the cafe with my head spinning. My mother was once a suspect. My aunt had been investigated, and I was born just months after Henry disappeared. I started to understand why my mother never spoke of the past. I went back to see Carla. This time, I didn't hold back. I showed her printed copies of the articles, Henry's photo, and excerpts from my mother's journal. Carla didn't speak for a long while. She turned away. Her eyes didn't dodge mine, but she didn't meet them either. She just looked exhausted. Then she pressed her hands on the table and stood up. She didn't go into another room. She didn't pull anything from a drawer. She slowly walked over to the wall behind me, where a single faded photograph was hanging. I didn't recognize anyone in it, just a small wooden house, a man standing at the door, his back to the camera. Carla spoke without turning around. I thought I would take all of it with me to the grave, but silence never makes the past go away. I don't have much time left, Emma. And if you've come this far, if you've seen his eyes in the mirror, then you deserve to know everything. Then she turned around, looked straight at me. For the first time, no more evasion. And she began to speak. That night, Henry came looking for Rose. They argued. He threatened to leave, said he'd never accept the baby, even tried to take her money. I arrived just in time to see Rose fall down the stairs. She was bleeding from her head. Henry turned to walk away, like nothing had happened. I lost control. I pushed him. He fell hard, hit his head on the railing. He didn't move again. I couldn't breathe. We hid the body, left town, changed our names. I never had children, and Rose gave birth to you. I looked at her. Carla didn't cry. She just looked at me, as if staring into everything she had spent a lifetime trying to forget. You carry half of Henry's blood, and you were raised by the woman who watched him die. Carla sat across from me. No tears, no excuses, only silence, as if she had just torn open her own past and no longer knew how to close it again. I looked at her and asked something I never thought I'd say. Why? Did you do it? Carla didn't flinch, because I'd seen it too many times. She began to speak. No pauses, no hesitation, as if she had carried these words in her chest for decades. And now, with so little time left, they no longer mattered, except as a way to set herself free. Before Henry met Rose, I was one of the women he lured. I froze. Carla went on, her voice steady, like someone reading their own memory out loud. I met him when I was 26. Henry was charming, smooth talking. He had that way of making women feel like they were special. I believed him. I fell in love. I got pregnant. I held my breath. And then he changed. He didn't hit me every day. He just, every time I asked for commitment, for responsibility, for recognition, he taught me to stay quiet. With words, with his hands, with the kind of look that made me feel worthless. I lost the baby in the 3rd month. No one knew. I lied and said I had fallen down the stairs. Carla smiled, bitterly. I buried that story with the child I never got to meet, and I swore I would never let anyone go through that again. When Rose started seeing him, I recognized it immediately. The way Henry smiled, the way he made people feel lucky just to be near him. But I didn't say anything. Rose was younger, more naive, and she trusted easily. I was afraid if I interfered, she'd think I was jealous. I thought I could just let it go. Until that night. Carla gripped the arms of her chair. Her voice didn't shake. But underneath, I felt something old and scorched begin to flicker. I went to Rose's house when I heard the banging on the door, the shouting. Henry had her by the arm, yanking her like she was a sack of trash. She had fallen. There was blood running down her forehead. And Henry, he turned to me and said, "What, is it your turn now?" I don't remember what I screamed. I only remember lunging at him. I pushed him. He lost his balance. His head hit the corner of the table. He didn't move again. Carla exhaled. I didn't kill him, in the legal sense, but I wanted to. I went still, the entire room filled with a suffocating silence, not of secrets anymore, but of consequences. I thought about confessing, she said. For years, every time I saw his face in those missing person articles. But I survived with one thought. If he were still alive, how many more people like me, like Rose, would he hurt? Carla looked up at me. For the first time, her eyes softened. I'm not telling you this to be forgiven, Emma. I just don't want you to carry all this pain without knowing where it really comes from. I stood up. I didn't say anything. I no longer saw Carla as a killer. I saw her as a woman who'd once been shattered from the inside and spent the rest of her life quietly stitching herself back together. She called out to me as I reached the door. I have pancreatic cancer, stage 4. There's not much time left. If you want to report this, I won't run, but if you choose not to, I'll understand. Because I know sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a pain that never truly goes away. I walked out, and for the first time in my life, I felt a strange mix of chaos and peace, like my world had just been turned upside down, but I could finally see it for what it really was. I didn't go to the police, not because I forgave her, not because I was afraid, but because I understood. Some sentences are carried out silently, by loneliness, by illness, and by the guilt that never leaves the one who bears it. Carla passed away a few weeks later, no one by her side. No one even knew she had died, except me. I returned to my mother's old house. The scent in the corner of her room was still familiar, but nothing else felt the same. This house used to be my safe place, my shelter, and now it had become the beginning of a truth I was never meant to hear. I walked into her bedroom, stood in front of the wall filled with family photographs. I looked into my mother's eyes in the photo, still that gentle gaze, still that same warm smile, only now I knew what was behind it, a lifetime of regret and secrecy. I didn't try to forgive. I didn't try to justify what my mother and Carla had done, but I understood why they reached that breaking point, because they loved, but not wisely, because they feared, but didn't have the courage to walk away, because they endured until they didn't realize how close they were to the edge. Rose never knew Henry's dark past, and she certainly didn't know that her own sister had once carried his child and had stayed silent, living with the pain for years. No one said anything. Each of them kept a part of the truth and let it rot inside them. And when the truth isn't spoken, it will explode, just like it did that night. When Henry fell, it wasn't just because of a shove. It was years of suppressed rage bursting out of a woman who had been silent for far too long. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to carry that silence with me. And I don't want to spend my life blaming myself for things I didn't do, simply because I didn't have the courage to face them. What I've learned didn't come from books. It came from the death of a man no one dared to speak of, and from the quiet disappearance of two women who had loved him in different ways and paid the price all the same. I left the house, carrying a lesson no one had ever taught me, but everyone needs to know. Love doesn't mean enduring everything. Violence is never a sign of love, and silence never saves anyone. When you love someone so much that you accept every wound, one day you may lose yourself entirely, and when you keep enduring, there may come a moment when you do something you can no longer control. I still love my mother, but I don't want to become her. Because sometimes the best way to love someone is not to repeat the path where they went wrong. And the greatest courage isn't in keeping a secret, but in breaking it, so you can finally start living a new life with eyes wide open and a heart that knows better.